In life, not everything deserves a reaction. Not every insult needs a reply. Not every situation needs you to stay and fight until the end. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is to quietly walk away. We live in a world where people think strength is in arguing, proving, and winning conversations. But real strength is often the ability to stay silent when your ego is screaming and to leave when your heart is being tested. There is a kind of dignity in silence, there is a kind of strength in distance, and there is a kind of faith in trusting that Allah will take care of what you chose to leave behind. Walking away quietly is not something that comes naturally to most people. The human ego wants to respond, to defend itself, to prove a point, and to make sure no one walks away thinking badly of you. When someone hurts you, misunderstands you, or speaks against you, the first reaction inside the heart is to explain, to argue, and to clear your name immediately. But growth begins when a person learns that not every situation requires a reaction, and not every voice deserves an answer. There comes a stage in life where you realize that responding to everything drains your peace more than it protects your dignity. When you keep engaging in every argument, you slowly begin to lose your inner calm. You start carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be yours. Every reply, every explanation, and every defense adds another layer of stress on your heart. Over time, you begin to notice that even when you win the argument, you still feel empty inside. That is because some battles are not about truth alone. They are about ego, pride, and misunderstanding, and those battles never truly end with satisfaction. There are situations where people have already made up their minds about you before you even speak. In such cases, your words do not reach their hearts. They only reach their ears. No matter how clearly you explain, they filter everything through their assumptions. At that point, continuing to argue is no longer a path to clarity. It becomes a cycle of frustration. A wise person begins to understand that silence can sometimes protect more dignity than 1,000 words. Walking away quietly is also about emotional discipline. It is about holding back the urge to react instantly. It is about recognizing that your time and energy are valuable, and not every situation deserves access to them. When you learn this, you stop scattering your energy on people who are not ready to understand you. Instead, you preserve your strength for things that actually matter in your life. Your faith, your growth, your peace, and your relationship with Allah. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is not to prove yourself, but to pause, to step back, to let go of the need to be understood by everyone. Because the truth is, no matter how pure your intentions are, there will always be people who misinterpret them. And if you spend your entire life trying to correct every misunderstanding, you will never find rest. This is why walking away quietly is not weakness at all. It is a sign that a person has reached a level of maturity where they no longer allow their emotions to control their actions. They choose peace over pride, silence over unnecessary noise, and self-control over instant reaction. Not every battle in life is meant for you to fight, and not every situation that provokes you deserves your response. There are moments when remaining silent is not a sign of defeat, but a sign of deep understanding that some matters are already beyond your control. A person grows in faith and wisdom when they begin to realize that responding to everything that hurts them does not always bring justice or closure. In fact, many times it only increases pain, deepens conflict, and disturbs the peace of the heart that Allah has given as a trust. When a person is constantly reacting to every argument, every insult, and every misunderstanding, they begin to live in a state of emotional exhaustion. The heart becomes restless because it is always engaged in defending itself, always trying to correct others, always trying to be heard. But the reality of life is that not every voice will listen, and not every mind will understand. Some people argue not to understand truth, but to defend their own perception, and in such cases your words lose their value, no matter how sincere they are. There are situations where silence becomes a form of surrender, not to injustice, but to Allah. It is a way of saying that I have done what I could, I have spoken where it was needed, and now I leave the rest to the one who sees everything. This kind of surrender is not weakness. It is actually one of the highest forms of trust in Allah. Because when you stop trying to control every outcome and every opinion, your heart becomes lighter and your faith becomes stronger. Many times people assume that staying quiet means you have nothing to say, but in reality, it often means you are choosing not to waste your energy on something that will not bring benefit. There are arguments that only increase distance between hearts, not understanding. There are confrontations that leave behind regretful words, words that cannot be taken back once spoken. A wise person learns to recognize these moments before stepping into them. It is also important to understand that not every situation requires your presence. Sometimes your absence is the most powerful message you can give. When you step away from unnecessary conflict, you are not running from responsibility, you are protecting your peace. You are preserving your heart from bitterness and resentment that often grows when people try too hard to be right instead of being at peace. In life, you will meet people who misunderstand your silence and mistake it for weakness. But what they do not realize is that silence is often chosen by those who have already understood the futility of arguing further. It is a conscious decision made by a heart that prefers stability over chaos, clarity over confusion, and peace over pride. And when a believer understands that Allah is fully aware of every injustice, every misunderstanding, and every unspoken truth, it becomes easier to let go. Because then the burden of proving yourself to people reduces, and the reliance on Allah increases. Silence is often misunderstood in a world where people believe that strength is measured by how loudly you respond and how strongly you defend yourself in every situation. But true strength is not always in speaking. It is in knowing when speaking will only add more harm than benefit. There are moments in life when a person reaches a level of awareness where they realize that responding to every accusation, every insult, and every misunderstanding does not bring peace. It only deepens the wound. In those moments, silence becomes not just an option, but a form of wisdom that protects both the heart and the dignity of a person. When a person constantly reacts, they give control of their emotions to others. Every comment becomes a trigger, every disagreement becomes a battle, and every misunderstanding becomes a burden. Over time, this weakens the heart, not because of what others say, but because of the constant need to respond to everything. Silence, on the other hand, restores control. It allows a person to step back, observe, and choose peace over emotional impulsiveness. There are situations where no matter how clearly you explain yourself, the other side is not listening with understanding, but with judgment. In such cases, words lose their effectiveness. They become noise rather than clarity. And when words no longer serve a purpose, silence becomes more powerful than speech. It carries a message without needing to be defended. It creates distance from unnecessary conflict while preserving inner calm. Silence is also a protection from regret. Many broken relationships, damaged friendships, and lifelong misunderstandings are not caused by silence, but by words spoken in anger. When emotions are high, words often come out in ways that cannot be taken back. A moment of anger can destroy what took years to build, but silence prevents that destruction. It gives space for emotions to settle, for the heart to calm, and for wisdom to take over reaction. A person who learns the power of silence begins to see situations differently. Instead of rushing to defend themselves, they start asking whether the situation even deserves their energy. They begin to understand that not every argument is worth their peace, and not every misunderstanding needs their explanation. This shift in thinking brings a kind of inner stability that cannot be achieved through constant confrontation. Silence is not about suppression, and it is not about pretending that nothing hurts. It is about choosing not to allow every hurt to control your actions. It is about holding your dignity even when others try to provoke you into losing it. It is about stepping back when stepping forward would only create more harm. In many cases, silence is what allows truth to unfold naturally. When a person does not react immediately, they give space for clarity to emerge on its own. Over time, people begin to see things as they truly are, without being influenced by heated arguments or emotional reactions. This natural unfolding often reveals more truth than any forced explanation ever could. Protecting your peace is one of the most important responsibilities a person has toward themselves, yet it is also one of the most neglected. Many people spend their lives trying to protect their reputation, their image, and the way others perceive them, but they forget to protect something far more valuable, which is the state of their own heart. Peace is not something that remains automatically intact. It is something that must be guarded, maintained, and sometimes even defended by choosing to step away from situations that disturb it. In life, there will always be people who challenge your calmness. Some will do it through harsh words, others through misunderstandings, and some simply through constant negativity. If a person responds to all of this without restraint, they slowly begin to lose their inner stability. The heart becomes heavy, the mind becomes restless, and the soul becomes tired. What started as a small disagreement can gradually turn into emotional exhaustion simply because the person refused to let go when letting go was the wiser choice. Protecting your peace means recognizing that not every environment deserves your presence and not every conversation deserves your participation. There are discussions that do not lead to understanding, only to more confusion. There are relationships that drain more than they nourish. And there are situations where the more you try to fix things, the more broken you feel inside. A wise person begins to notice these patterns and chooses distance not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. There is a strong temptation in human nature to want to be right, to be understood, and to be validated. But when this desire becomes stronger than the desire for peace, a person begins to enter unnecessary conflicts repeatedly. They find themselves explaining, defending, and justifying themselves to people who are not even willing to listen. This cycle slowly weakens the heart and creates an emotional dependency on approval that is never guaranteed. True peace is found when a person understands that their worth is not dependent on being accepted by everyone. Not everyone will understand your intentions, and not everyone is meant to stay in your life. When this realization settles in the heart, the need to constantly prove oneself begins to fade. Instead of chasing validation, the person begins to prioritize calmness over chaos, even if it means walking away from certain people or situations. Protecting your peace also requires discipline. It requires resisting the urge to engage in every argument that feels unjust or every comment that feels offensive. Not every injustice needs your immediate response, because some responses only multiply the disturbance instead of resolving it. Sometimes the most powerful action is to disengage, to step back, and to allow time to reveal what words cannot. When a person begins to protect their peace consistently, they start noticing a change within themselves. Their reactions become calmer, their thoughts become clearer, and their heart becomes less burdened by the actions of others. They begin to experience a kind of inner stability that is not easily shaken by external chaos. This is not because life becomes easier, but because their response to life becomes wiser. Walking away can sometimes feel like losing something, especially when emotions are involved, when memories are attached, and when the heart is still hoping for things to change. But there are moments in life where staying does not preserve anything. Instead, it slowly destroys your inner peace, your self-respect, and even your clarity of mind. In such moments, walking away is not a loss. It is a form of protection from what could eventually become deeper emotional damage. A person may not realize it immediately, but certain environments, conversations, and relationships can slowly drain a person's energy until they no longer recognize themselves. When a person remains in situations that repeatedly hurt them, they often begin to compromise their own well-being just to maintain connection or avoid conflict. They start tolerating what they should not tolerate, explaining what does not need to be explained, and staying where their dignity is slowly being ignored. Over time, this creates emotional heaviness. The heart becomes confused between attachment and self-respect, between loyalty and self-preservation. That is why walking away, although difficult, becomes necessary at times. Many people fear walking away because they associate it with defeat. They feel that leaving means they have accepted loss or admitted weakness. But in reality, there are situations where leaving is the only way to preserve what remains of your dignity. Not every fight is meant to be continued until the end. Some fights are meant to teach you when to stop fighting altogether. When a person understands this, their perspective begins to shift from emotional reaction to thoughtful decision. Walking away quietly also prevents regret. When emotions are high, words are often spoken without thinking, and actions are taken without reflection. Many relationships and situations are permanently damaged, not because people walked away too soon, but because they stayed too long and said too much. Silence and distance in the right moment can save a person from saying things that they will later wish they could erase. There is also a deeper wisdom in recognizing when something is no longer serving your emotional or spiritual well-being. Not every bond is meant to last forever, and not every connection is meant to grow. Some connections are temporary lessons that help shape your understanding of yourself, your patience, and your boundaries. Once the lesson is complete, holding on only brings more pain. Letting go becomes an act of acceptance rather than resistance. Walking away quietly also reflects trust. Trust that you do not need to force outcomes. Trust that you do not need to fight every battle to prove your worth. And trust that what is meant for you will not require you to constantly sacrifice your peace. It is a recognition that your value is not determined by how long you stay in draining situations, but by how wisely you choose to step away from them. In time, those who learn to walk away quietly begin to notice that their life becomes less chaotic. Their emotional energy is preserved, their mind becomes clearer, and their heart becomes lighter. They no longer feel the need to chase every misunderstanding or fix every broken perception. Instead, they begin to move with more awareness, choosing carefully where to invest their presence and where to withdraw it without noise or explanation. In the end, learning to walk away quietly is not about losing people, winning arguments, or proving who is right. It is about protecting something far more valuable than pride or ego, and that is the peace of your heart. Life will constantly place you in situations where you are tested, where your emotions are triggered, and where your patience is stretched beyond comfort. But not every situation deserves your reaction, and not every person deserves your energy. There is a strength in silence that many people do not understand until they experience its healing. When you stop reacting to everything, you start observing life with more clarity. When you stop trying to prove yourself to everyone, you start discovering your true worth. And when you learn to step away from what disturbs your peace, you begin to realize how much unnecessary weight you were carrying for so long. Walking away quietly is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is choosing dignity over drama, patience over impulsiveness, and faith over frustration. It is trusting that Allah sees what you go through, understands what you endure, and knows what others fail to understand about you. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all, and the most beautiful victory is the one where you leave everything in the hands of Allah and simply move forward in peace.